Get on the ground now. The voice was sharp, heavy with authority. The kind of voice that could break glass, make you forget who you were. Kira's heart lurched. Her mind scrambled to grasp what was happening. She hadn't done anything wrong, but the officers were unyielding in their commands, pushing her back, forcing her to kneel. She opened her mouth, but the words died in her throat as a heavy hand clasped over her shoulder, shoving her to the asphalt. Pain shot through her spine as the gritty street scraped against her skin. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, voice cutting through the tension like a razor. "You have the right to remain silent." Her breath hitched. No, this couldn't be happening. She wasn't supposed to be the one in cuffs. Kira turned her head, her gaze catching the streetlights, the faces of onlookers blurred by the wet night air. "You don't know who I am," she tried to say, but her voice was drowned out by the hum of panic in her chest. "Stay down." The officer barked, stepping over her as if she were just another suspect. As if she weren't someone who'd spent years drafting laws, protecting the very system that was now crumbling around her. The words caught in her throat again. The reality of it all hit her like a sucker punch. She wasn't just any woman. She was Kira Bennett, state attorney for the city of Baltimore. "Please," Kira whispered, barely able to breathe. "This is a mistake. Ma'am, do you want to keep talking, or do you want to cooperate?" The officer snapped. He wasn't listening. None of them were. The familiar weight of the cuffs bit into her wrists, too tight, too real. She could hear the sirens, the bustle of her own blood rushing in her ears. Her heartbeat slammed in her chest. What had she done? What could they possibly think she had done? A voice in her head screamed, but all she could do was fight back the tears. Then, something strange happened. A shift. As the officers pulled her to her feet, one of them, his expression blank, muttered, "You better shut up before I charge you with resisting arrest." Her breath came out in a harsh, ragged sob. "Who's in charge here?" she demanded, pushing through the panic, the mounting pressure. "Who's?" "Shut it, lady." The officer's grip on her arm tightened as he dragged her to the patrol car. The door slammed. Kira's mind raced, trying to make sense of it all, but nothing added up. What was happening? Why was she being treated like this? Before the door shut completely, she heard one of the officers mutter something that made her blood run cold. "Can you believe she's the state attorney?" Kira's world went silent. Kira Bennett wasn't used to being afraid. She'd been the one others turned to when fear gripped them. As a state attorney, she'd fought cases that shook the very foundations of the legal system. She'd put criminals behind bars, stood up to powerful forces, and, at times, had been the lone voice against the tide. Yet, nothing had prepared her for this. Her life had always been a calculated balance of work, family, and the demands of a city that had no patience for weakness. But tonight, that delicate balance was about to shatter in a way that she couldn't even begin to understand. She had been on her way home, late as usual, after a long meeting with a team of detectives. They'd been discussing a growing problem, corruption deep within the city's police force, and while she was certain of what had to be done, it felt like she was losing ground every day. The fight wasn't just against criminals. It was against the very system that was meant to uphold the law. When the lights of the patrol car had flared behind her, she hadn't thought much of it at first. It was routine. A traffic stop, likely. She had pulled over, checked her phone quickly for any urgent messages, and then turned to face the officer who had stepped out of the squad car. Everything after that had happened too quickly. Words were exchanged that didn't make sense. Her refusal to accept their accusations had only made it worse. They hadn't even explained why they were detaining her. And now here she was. She hadn't fought it. Not yet. But her mind screamed at her, demanding to know why, how, who. The car rolled forward, the sound of the sirens ringing in her ears, and Kira's breath came in shallow bursts. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She couldn't grab it, couldn't reach it in time. The officer had placed her in the back seat of the squad car with a firm hand, a firm look, as if it had all been decided before they'd even spoken to her. The streetlights flickered outside the window, casting long, strange shadows across the night. Her thoughts raced. She thought about her mother, her sister, the family she hadn't seen enough of, the calls she'd missed. The guilt gnawed at her now, the confusion settling like dust. But none of that mattered anymore. Not now. Not with this weight pressing down on her chest. A flash of movement outside the car caught her attention, and for the briefest second, She thought she saw someone she knew in the crowd of people gathered at the intersection. But it was gone too quickly. Who had seen her? Who would know what was happening? Her heart skipped a beat. Her hands were shaking, but she couldn't stop them. The officers hadn't told her where they were going. But she knew. She recognized the route. The courthouse. Her pulse quickened as the car slowed. What were they going to do to her? This was a nightmare. Just a bad dream. She had been in and out of that building hundreds of times. But this wasn't how it was supposed to end. Her phone buzzed again. She risked a glance, then immediately regretted it when she saw the number flashing on the screen. It was the mayor. Her stomach twisted. If they were calling her this late, this wasn't going to be good. Could they be connected? Had the corruption she'd been uncovering reached this far? Before she could react, the car turned sharply, pulling into the dark parking lot of the police station. Kira felt the dread spread through her limbs, a cold, suffocating fog settling around her chest. "Ms. Bennett, you can remain silent." An officer's voice cut through the thick silence. "But anything you say will be used against you in a court of law." Kira blinked. He knew who she was, didn't he? Was this really happening? Or was there more to it than she understood? Kira's mind spun, her thoughts slipping like water through her fingers. She had fought battles, faced down the worst criminals in Baltimore, and yet nothing had prepared her for the sheer helplessness she felt now. Sitting in the back of this squad car, heading straight for a place where she'd once been the one calling the shots. "Get out of the car," the officer ordered, his voice cold. Her door was yanked open before she could respond. The sharp scent of gasoline, sweat, and stale coffee filled the air as Kira was guided out of the car with a hand on her arm. The cool night air hit her skin, but it couldn't cool the fire that had ignited inside her. She was more than just confused now. She was furious. This wasn't just an error. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an attack. As the officers led her toward the building, she tried to regain some semblance of control, trying to suppress the surge of panic that threatened to overwhelm her. "Let me speak to the captain," Kira said, her voice steady, but her heart raced. The officer didn't even look at her. "You'll talk when it's time. Follow me." Her mind scrambled. The captain. Of course. She knew the captain of the station, had worked with him on several high-profile cases. But something told her that the familiarity she thought she had with the system wasn't going to help her now. Not when she was being treated like a common criminal. They entered the station, the sharp fluorescent lights making her feel even more exposed. The noise, the clattering of phones and boots on tile floors, the murmurs of officers as they went about their business. It was all so familiar. But today it felt wrong. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating, like everyone in the building could smell the storm that was brewing. Kira's stomach twisted into knots, and her breath became shallow as they led her down a hallway she knew too well, one she'd walked down so many times to meet witnesses, to meet victims, to bring justice. Now, she was the one being led by the handcuffs. "Is this really necessary?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. The officer gave her no reply, just a silent nod toward an interrogation room at the end of the hallway. They shoved her into a chair, the cold metal biting into her skin as they removed her cuffs, leaving her sitting there, the silence now deafening. Kira looked around the room. The familiar whiteboard was still there, scribbled with case notes, the lone lamp overhead casting long shadows over the chipped table. But it wasn't her case that was about to be discussed. It was hers. "Don't worry," one of the officers said before he left, his voice a mocking sneer. "We'll get to the bottom of this soon enough." Kira was alone. Her head swam. What had she walked into? Her thoughts returned to her phone. The buzzing, the missed call from the mayor. She hadn't answered it, but now she regretted it. If someone had called her this late, they needed her. But what could she possibly do now? Kira closed her eyes, willing herself to think clearly. She couldn't lose it. She couldn't. She had been through too much to let something like this take her down. The door swung open, and her head snapped up. The captain walked in, his face drawn, his steps slow, deliberate. His eyes were grim, calculating. "Kira," he said, his voice low, as if to soften the blow. "We need to talk." "What the hell is going on?" Kira demanded, pushing herself up from the chair, her chest tight with frustration. "You know me. You know who I am. You know I'm not some criminal." The captain closed the door behind him and leaned against it. "I'm sorry it's come to this, but we have to follow protocol." "Protocol?" Kira repeated, incredulous. This is an arrest, not a protocol. You've got the wrong woman. He shook his head, eyes darting away for a second, then back to her. There's been a mistake. A mistake. Kira's voice cracked. A mistake. Her hands clenched into fists, nails digging into her palms. I'm the state attorney. I'm the one who… Stop. The captain cut her off, holding up his hand. We're not arresting you because of your position. This is about something else. Kira stared at him, blinking, her pulse quickening. Then tell me what it's about. Tell me why I'm here. He sighed, taking a deep breath. The weight of what he was about to say settled in the space between them. Someone made a report, Kira, the captain said slowly. Someone said you were involved in something big, something we can't ignore. And now we have to investigate. Kira's mind reeled. She couldn't think. What report? What are you talking about? You've been accused of being involved in a massive corruption scheme. A scheme that goes all the way up to the highest levels of the city government. It's serious, Kira. Her blood ran cold. I didn't do this, she whispered, her voice faltering for the first time. This is a mistake. A setup. The captain's eyes flickered with something that resembled regret, but he didn't move toward her. He stayed rooted by the door, his posture defensive. I know you. I've worked with you. But we have to follow the evidence, Kira. Kira shook her head, trying to hold back the sting in her eyes. I've spent my whole life working to fix this broken system. Why would I be part of it? Why would I? Look, I'm not saying I believe it, the captain interjected. But the report's official. The investigation's ongoing. You need to stay quiet for now. Stay quiet. Kira repeated, her voice rising with fury. You're arresting me and telling me to stay quiet? How can you? The door flew open again. Another officer stepped in, eyes wide with alarm. Captain, we've got something. The captain turned, his face already set. What is it? The officer handed him a folder, the weight of it seeming to grow heavier in the air. We've got an anonymous tip. They've got a video. Kira's heart skipped a beat. The officer's voice was barely audible as he spoke. It's her. It's Kira Bennett. Her world stopped. For a moment, everything felt like it was underwater. The captain's gaze didn't leave her as the officer handed him the video. What video? Kira asked, barely able to breathe. The captain didn't answer. He turned the screen toward her. And there, in the grainy footage, was Kira, in the center of a dimly lit office, talking to someone in hushed tones. Someone she didn't recognize. Someone important. Kira's stomach dropped. The officer's voice was cutting through the haze. You were at that meeting, weren't you? The silence stretched out, suffocating. The video was real, but the question remained. What had she done? Kira's heart hammered in her chest as the video played out on the captain's phone. She could barely breathe. She watched herself on the screen, her face, her posture, the way she stood, the way her hands moved. But what struck her more than anything was the man she was talking to. A man she didn't know. A man whose face was obscured by the shadows of the poorly lit office, but whose presence screamed danger. His voice was indistinct, the words muffled. Kira had no memory of this meeting, of this conversation, but there she was, standing in that room like she knew exactly who he was, exactly what was happening. She could feel the coldness of the room closing in on her, the space between the officers and her shrinking. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. I don't remember this, she whispered, more to herself than to the officers. She looked at the captain, then back at the screen. I don't know who that is. The captain's eyes were sharp, studying her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. You're saying this is fake? I'm saying I don't know anything about this, Kira said, shaking her head, her voice shaking, though she fought it. I don't know him. I've never met him. The officer who had brought the video in stepped forward, his expression tight. We've had the video analyzed. It's not doctored. The meeting took place in your office. The timestamp checks out. Her chest tightened. No, this couldn't be real. It was impossible. Your office, Kira said, the words barely leaving her mouth. It's part of the investigation. You were seen there, talking to him, the captain replied, his voice heavy with something close to disappointment. I don't want to believe this, Kira, but right now, it doesn't look good. Kira stood frozen, her mind struggling to process the events. The weight of the room felt unbearable. The floor beneath her felt like it could give way at any moment. Her thoughts were swirling, her stomach churning. I didn't do this, Kira said again, more forcefully this time. I swear to you, I don't know who that man is. This is a setup. This is… Her voice cracked. She was suffocating. There was no way they could believe her now, not after that video. They didn't know her. Not really. She was just a face to them. Just another criminal. I need to speak to my lawyer, Kira said through gritted teeth, her tone final, though every part of her body screamed in protest. The captain's expression faltered. You know you can't talk to anyone until we get this sorted out, Kira. You're in this deep, whether you like it or not. Her fists clenched at her sides, her nails digging into her skin. The officers moved to leave, but Kira's voice stopped them. Wait, she said, her words trembling but clear. I'm telling you, this isn't me. I didn't do this. The captain paused, but his gaze was impassive, unreadable. You need to get your story straight, Kira, because right now, it looks like you're in way over your head. As they walked out, the door clicked shut behind them, and the room descended into suffocating silence. Kira sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the table, trying to summon the will to stand up. But her thoughts were so tangled, she couldn't even make sense of them. The pieces of this nightmare didn't fit together. She had worked too hard to get here, to build her career, to protect the city, to have it all ripped away by something she couldn't even understand. She had to find the truth, had to find a way out. But how? Kira's mind raced back to the video. The man. The dark office. She had to remember something. Anything. But the harder she tried, the more elusive it became. With a sharp breath, Kira pulled herself together. She had been through worse. Much worse. This was just another battle, just another fight for survival. She stood up, her legs unsteady beneath her. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the door, then stopped, feeling the weight of the captain's words crushing her chest. What if he was right? What if she really was involved in something she couldn't control? But no, she couldn't believe it. Not yet. She had to find out who that man was. She had to fight back. The door opened, and Kira stepped into the hallway. She didn't know where she was going or what she was going to do, but she couldn't stay locked up in that room. The station felt colder now, more hostile. Officers moved around her, but they ignored her. No one spoke to her, and no one met her eyes. She was a ghost walking through her own life. Her phone buzzed again. The mayor. Kira's hands shook as she pulled the phone from her pocket, the screen lighting up. Without thinking, she answered. Kira, the mayor's voice cracked with urgency. What's going on? I just heard. Are you all right? Kira swallowed hard. I don't know, Mayor. I don't know what's going on. Listen to me, the mayor said, his voice low but firm. This is bigger than you think. You have to trust me. There are people behind this. People who want to bring you down. But you can't let them win. Kira's breath hitched. Who? Who are you talking about? The line went silent for a moment before the mayor spoke again, his voice barely audible. I can't say too much, but I'm sending someone to help. Stay calm, Kira. They're watching everything you do. Kira's eyes flickered to the officers who had just walked past her, their eyes trained straight ahead, ignoring her. They know everything. They're watching. Kira's stomach dropped. The mayor's voice came again, quieter, more urgent now. You can't trust anyone right now. You have to figure this out. Don't let them get to you. Just stay safe. Do what you have to do. The line went dead. Kira lowered the phone slowly, her thoughts a blur. She couldn't trust anyone. Who had set her up? Why? And more importantly, who would be coming to help her? The cold fear she'd been holding at bay surged back, but now, mixed with something else. A growing sense of resolve. Someone was out to get her, and she wasn't going to go down without a fight. Kira's steps quickened as she walked toward the exit, her mind racing with the urgency of it all. She had no idea what the next move was, but she knew one thing for sure. Whoever had orchestrated this wanted to destroy everything she had worked for, and they had no idea who they were messing with. Kira stepped into the chilly night air, the rush of cool breeze against her skin doing little to calm the fire in her chest. The city around her was eerily quiet, like it was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. Her heart was still pounding from the conversation with the mayor, but there was no time to waste. She glanced at her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen, but then she stopped. No one could be trusted, not right now. Whoever was behind this, whoever had set her up, they had connections, too many for Kira to figure out alone. She knew better than anyone how quickly a lie could spread, how quickly reputations could be destroyed. Her own position as state attorney could be lost in a flash, and with it, all the work she'd put into protecting the city she loved. But Kira wasn't just going to stand by and let that happen. She had a reputation for being tough, relentless, and unyielding. This wasn't the time to crumble. She needed answers. Kira walked briskly toward the entrance of the building, her mind racing. The video. The man in the shadows. Her office. She couldn't recall a meeting, but she had to have been there. She was meticulous about her calendar. Every detail had a purpose. As she neared the front doors, she spotted an officer standing near the entrance, watching her closely. He didn't speak, but his eyes followed her every move. She wasn't sure if it was suspicion or something more. A sense of helplessness mirrored in his gaze. "Can I help you?" Kira asked, keeping her voice steady, though her mind was still whirling. The officer looked like he was about to respond, then hesitated, his eyes flickering towards something behind her. Kira turned, only to see another officer walking toward them, a thick folder in his hand. He exchanged a glance with the first officer before looking directly at Kira. "We need you to come back inside, ma'am," the second officer said, his tone flat, as though the request was non-negotiable. "No," Kira replied firmly, her feet planted on the sidewalk. "I'm done with this. I need to speak to my lawyer." She turned away, her hand reaching for her phone, ready to make a call, but before she could dial, the officer grabbed her arm. "You can't just walk away." Kira's blood boiled. Her first instinct was to pull away, to push him off her, but she took a deep breath, steadying herself. She wasn't going to let them provoke her. Not yet. She needed to be smarter than that. "Let go of me," Kira said, her voice low but fierce. The officer didn't move. Instead, he leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. "If you're trying to escape, it's not going to work. You're already in too deep." Kira froze, every muscle in her body tense. It wasn't just the arrest. It was the way they were treating her, like they knew something she didn't. She looked him in the eyes. "What do you mean by that?" The officer's gaze flickered with something. Fear, maybe, or something deeper that Kira couldn't read. But he didn't answer. Instead, he yanked her arm harder, pushing her back toward the entrance. "Let her go," a voice suddenly called from behind them. It was firm, commanding, and to Kira's surprise, it came from someone she knew well, Detective Marcus Hill, a man she had worked with on a few high-profile cases over the years. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes narrowing at the officers. He wasn't in his usual suit. He was wearing civilian clothes, a worn leather jacket thrown over his shoulders. His presence seemed to calm the tension in the air, though the storm inside Kira's chest only intensified. "What the hell is going on here?" Marcus demanded, his voice authoritative. He moved to Kira's side, standing between her and the two officers. "We're just following orders, Detective," one of the officers said, stepping back slightly, clearly uneasy under Marcus's gaze. "Orders?" Marcus's voice rose, filled with disbelief. "Do you know who you're arresting? She's the state attorney. You have no right to treat her like this." The officer stiffened, but he didn't argue. He just turned, his eyes flickering nervously between Marcus and Kira. Marcus turned to Kira, his eyes softer now, filled with understanding. "Are you okay?" Kira wanted to scream, to collapse, but she held herself together, forcing her voice to steady. "I don't know, Marcus. They've arrested me for something I didn't do. I have no idea what's going on, and I need your help." Marcus studied her for a moment, his jaw tightening. "This isn't just a mistake, Kira. It's bigger than that. They've set you up. I don't know who yet, but they have a plan. And they're going to use you as a pawn in whatever game they're playing." Kira's stomach lurched. The thought of being used, manipulated like that, it sickened her. She had worked her entire life to protect the innocent, to expose corruption, and now she was at the mercy of whatever shadowy figures had decided to bring her down. "What do I do?" she asked, desperation creeping into her voice. "I need to know what's going on. I need to clear my name before they ruin everything I've worked for." Marcus hesitated. "I'm not sure, Kira, but I've been digging into the case. I think I found something." Her heart leaped in her chest. "What did you find?" "A link between the man in that video and a few key people in city politics. There's been talk of a major crackdown on corruption, and I think your name got dragged into it, whether you want it or not." Kira's breath caught in her throat. "So they're using me as a scapegoat?" Marcus nodded. "Exactly. But it's not just your name they're after. This is bigger. Whoever's behind this has access to resources, people who can make things disappear." Kira's mind raced. She felt the walls closing in again, but this time, there was a flicker of hope in the darkness. She had someone in her corner. I need you to help me, Kira said, her voice low and tense. I need to find out who did this. I need to expose them before it's too late. Marcus nodded, his expression serious. I'll do whatever I can. But we need to be careful. People are watching. And whoever set this up won't stop until they've destroyed everything you've worked for. Kira's fingers curled into fists, her resolve hardening. Let them watch. I'm not going down without a fight. Kira stood at the edge of a new, dangerous path. She had no idea where it would lead, but there was one thing she knew for certain. This wasn't over. Whoever had pulled the strings in this conspiracy was going to regret underestimating her. The game had just begun. Kira's thoughts were as sharp as broken glass, cutting through the haze of fear and uncertainty. She had no idea where this was leading, but Marcus's words echoed in her mind. People are watching, and whoever set this up won't stop until they've destroyed everything you've worked for. The weight of that truth felt unbearable, like a shadow stalking her every move. But Marcus had given her something she hadn't had since the moment they slapped the cuffs on her, a sliver of hope. She wasn't alone in this. He was with her, and he wasn't just any ally. Marcus Hill was a detective with a reputation for getting to the heart of even the dirtiest cases. If anyone could help her untangle this web, it was him. They stepped away from the officers, the tension in the air still thick enough to cut. The city's hum was distant in the background, a constant reminder of the life Kira had built and the one that now threatened to collapse around her. I'll make sure you're safe tonight, Marcus said, his voice a low promise. But we need to get ahead of this. They'll try to move fast. You won't even see them coming. I don't care about safety, Kira said, her eyes burning with a fierce determination. I care about clearing my name. I need to know who set me up and why. I need answers. Marcus nodded grimly. Then we start digging. The cold night air wrapped around them as they walked out of the station, the city streets sprawling before them, empty and silent. The flickering streetlights cast long, unsettling shadows across the sidewalk. Kira's phone buzzed again, but she ignored it. She couldn't afford to be distracted. She had more pressing matters at hand. Marcus led the way, his posture tense but controlled. They didn't talk much on the walk. There was no need. Both of them were thinking about the same thing: how to uncover the truth and how to survive the storm that was brewing. After a few blocks, Marcus turned to her. I'm taking you to a safe place. You need to lay low for a while. Kira raised an eyebrow. A safe place? What does that mean? Marcus hesitated, then exhaled slowly. It's not about hiding. It's about staying one step ahead. I'm meeting with a contact who might know more about the people behind this. They'll have information, people on the inside who could give us something we can use. Kira's mind raced. She wasn't used to playing defense, but right now, that was all she could do. I can't just sit here, she said, frustration lacing her voice. I need to do something. Marcus met her gaze, his eyes soft but firm. You will. But right now, staying alive is the first step. After that, we go after whoever is pulling the strings. Kira bit her lip, her gaze wandering to the dimly lit street ahead. It felt wrong, too passive, too slow. But Marcus was right. She couldn't afford to charge in blindly. She had to play this smart. They reached an old, nondescript building tucked away between two larger ones. The air was quieter here, the city's chaos muffled by the thick walls. Marcus led her through a back door and down a narrow staircase into a basement apartment, its space lit by a single flickering bulb. The room smelled of stale coffee and old books, a stark contrast to the tension that filled the air. Stay here, Marcus said as he walked toward a desk in the corner. I'll be back in a bit. Kira took a seat by the window, her mind still racing. Her pulse was still quick from the adrenaline of the night's events. Every shadow outside seemed to move, every passing car a potential threat. But she had to calm down. She had to think. She pulled her phone from her pocket again, eyes narrowing when she saw the number. It was from a blocked caller. Kira hesitated. Was this a trap? Could it be another part of the game they were playing with her? She answered anyway. Kira. The voice was low, familiar. Her stomach dropped. Mom? She whispered, her voice trembling. Is that you? Yes, baby. Her mother's voice faltered, then steadied. You need to listen to me. I don't have much time. There are people who know more about this than you think. And they're watching you. You need to be careful. Kira stood up, pacing the room. I don't understand. Who are they? Who's doing this to me? Her mother's voice lowered. and Kira could hear the fear in her words. I can't tell you everything right now, but there are powerful people involved in this. People who have a stake in bringing you down. I've been hearing things, rumors, whispers about a big push to take you out. They're not just going after your career, they're going after your life. Kira's chest tightened. Mom, this isn't just about me. They're framing me for something I didn't do. I know, her mother said, the tremor in her voice almost breaking Kira's resolve. But there's more to it than you think. The people behind this, they have connections. High-level people. I'm not sure who you can trust right now, but Marcus Hill, he's your best shot. Kira clenched her fists. She already knew Marcus was the one person who would stand by her, but hearing her mother confirm it made her stomach churn. Listen, Mom, Kira said, voice trembling with a mix of rage and fear. I'm going to find out who did this. I'm going to clear my name. Her mother was silent for a moment. Then she spoke again, her voice quieter. Just be careful. And don't trust anyone, Kira. Not even the ones who seem like they're on your side. Kira swallowed, the weight of her mother's words pressing on her chest. I'll be careful. I promise. She ended the call and stood by the window, staring out at the empty street below. Her mother's warning gnawed at her. She couldn't trust anyone. Her thoughts flickered back to the video, to the man she'd seen in the shadows, the anonymous figures pulling the strings. And somewhere deep inside her, she knew that this was only the beginning. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to ruin her. They were playing a game with a far bigger prize at stake. And Kira was caught right in the middle of it. Marcus returned a short while later, his expression hard. He didn't say anything at first, but the tension in his body told Kira everything she needed to know. What did you find out? She asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Marcus exhaled sharply. It's worse than we thought. Whoever's behind this has been planning for a long time. I've got a lead and name. Someone who's pulling the strings from behind the scenes. But I don't know if we can trust it. Kira felt her pulse quicken. Tell me. Marcus stepped closer, pulling out a small notebook. He flipped it open, revealing a name scrawled in messy handwriting. Victor Hayes. Kira's eyes widened. Victor Hayes. The name rang a bell. She didn't know the details, but she knew Hayes was no small player. He was a fixer, a man with a hand in everything from politics to underground operations. If he was involved in this, it was a big deal. This isn't just about me, Kira said, her voice barely above a whisper. This is bigger than we thought. Marcus nodded. I think you're right. And now we need to figure out what Hayes wants, and why you're caught in the middle of it. Kira felt the weight of the moment settle over her. She was in it now, for better or worse. And there was no turning back. The name Victor Hayes hit Kira like a ton of bricks, each syllable laced with danger. Hayes wasn't just some local businessman or corrupt politician. He was a shadow, a power broker who operated just beneath the surface, with ties that stretched far and wide. His name had surfaced in some of the most high-profile investigations, always just out of reach, a ghost hiding behind legal loopholes and dirty money. No one ever caught him. No one ever got close. But now Kira was tied to him. Somehow. She turned away from Marcus, pacing the small apartment, her mind whirring with possibilities, each one darker than the last. Why me? She kept asking herself. Why had she become his target? What could someone like Hayes possibly want with her? And how was he connected to the mess she was now embroiled in? I don't understand, she muttered aloud, running her fingers through her hair. What's his angle? Marcus's voice was low but urgent. That's what we need to find out. But right now, we have to move fast. If Hayes is involved, it's only a matter of time before he makes his next move. Kira turned toward him, eyes sharp. Then we have to beat him to the punch. Whatever he's planning, we need to know now. Agreed, Marcus said, pulling out his phone. I've got a contact who's familiar with Hayes's operations. He might be able to give us something concrete. I'll reach out to him and see what we can dig up. Kira nodded, her mind still processing everything. She felt like she was swimming through a fog, the edges of the truth just out of reach, but every instinct she had told her that Hayes was at the center of it all. This wasn't random. Someone had put her in his sights, and she had to figure out who before it was too late. Marcus's voice pulled her from her thoughts. While I make the call, I need you to stay put. Don't leave here. You're not safe out there yet. Hayes has people everywhere. Kira didn't argue. She knew he was right. As much as it gnawed at her to sit idly by while her life was being torn apart, she couldn't afford to make a misstep. Every second counted. She sat back down, her fingers itching to do something, anything. But for now, she could only wait. Wait and think. The minutes dragged by in the dim light of the apartment. Kira tried to keep her mind sharp, replaying every interaction, every piece of information that might have led her here. The meeting with the mysterious man in the video, the look on the officers' faces when they arrested her, the way they dismissed her protestations as if she were just another criminal. It all pointed to one thing. Someone had orchestrated this. But who? Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. She looked down. It was a message from Marcus. "I've got something. Meet me at the usual spot in 20 minutes. Stay alert." Kira's heart skipped a beat. The usual spot. Marcus wasn't kidding around. This was real. Whatever he had uncovered, it was big. She quickly stood, her body stiff from sitting too long. She couldn't waste any time. Marcus's warning echoed in her head. Stay alert. Hayes was no amateur. If he was really behind this, every step Kira took would be watched. She had to be cautious, strategic. There would be no room for mistakes. 20 minutes later, Kira met Marcus outside an old warehouse on the edge of the city. The area was desolate, the streets empty, save for the faint hum of distant traffic. Marcus was waiting by a parked car, his back to her as he spoke to someone on the phone. She walked up silently, trying not to draw attention. Her heart was pounding as she approached him, but she kept her expression neutral, her body language controlled. Marcus hung up as she neared and turned to face her, his expression tight. "Talk to me," Kira said, her voice low. Marcus gave her a brief nod. "I spoke to my contact. Hayes isn't just some shadowy figure in the background. He's deep in city politics. Deep. And if the rumors are true, he's been using people in positions of power for years. People who can make things disappear." Kira's stomach dropped. Disappear? Disappearing evidence. Disappearing people. You name it. Marcus paused, looking at her. "And now he's got his eyes on you. My contact's pretty sure that the arrest, the video, it's all part of a bigger game. Someone's using you to take down other targets, using you as leverage to destabilize the system." "Who?" Kira demanded. "Who's pulling the strings?" "I don't know yet, but I'm digging. And if Hayes is behind this, he's got a lot of influence. He won't just give up." Kira ran a hand over her face, her frustration building. "So, I'm caught in the middle of a war between corrupt politicians and power players." "Something like that," Marcus said grimly. "But that's not the worst of it." Kira froze, her blood running cold. "What do you mean?" "There's a mole inside the system," Marcus said quietly, his eyes narrowing. "Someone close to you. Someone with access to everything you've been working on." Kira felt her breath catch in her throat. A mole? She scanned her mind, trying to think of who could have betrayed her. She trusted so few people, but even those who were close to her. Could any of them be capable of this? "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No way. I can't." "Listen, Kira," Marcus interrupted gently. "This is bigger than any one person. This is about control. And whoever's behind this knows exactly how to play the game. They're using you as a pawn in a larger scheme." Kira's fists clenched at her sides. She wasn't going to be anyone's pawn. She was done playing by their rules. "We need to find out who's behind it," she said, her voice firm, determination flooding her chest. "We need to get to Hayes. We need to pull him into the light." Marcus studied her, his eyes conflicted. "We're not going after Hayes directly yet. If we do that, we'll be playing into his hands. We need to outsmart him. We need to get the mole." Kira nodded slowly. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll find the mole." Marcus exhaled sharply. "I'll keep digging, but I need you to stay off the radar. The last thing we want is to put a target on you before we know who's pulling the strings." Kira's lips pressed into a tight line. She had no intention of hiding. She'd already lost too much. "I'm not running, Marcus. If I have to walk through fire to get the truth, then that's what I'll do." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken understanding. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then let's burn it all down." Kira stood there for a moment, looking out over the city. She had no idea what the next step was, but the feeling of it, the weight of the decision, hung in the air like an unlit fuse. She was going after the truth, and no one was going to stop her. Kira's resolve hardened as she stood in the quiet of the warehouse, the cool air biting at her skin. The city sprawled before her, a dark labyrinth of secrets, but she knew now that no matter how twisted the web was, she would untangle it. Marcus's words echoed in her mind. "We need to get the mole." Her stomach twisted at the thought of betrayal. Someone close to her, someone she'd trusted, was leaking information, playing a dangerous game with her life. Who could it be? The question gnawed at her, impossible to answer. Every face she saw in the courthouse, every person who worked alongside her, it all blurred into uncertainty. But she couldn't waste time thinking about it. She had to act. I'll reach out to some of my contacts, Marcus said, pulling her back from her thoughts. See what we can learn about Hayes' network. In the meantime, you need to figure out who's been feeding them information. Kiera nodded, her fingers curling into fists at her sides. She wasn't going to just sit back and let this happen. She needed to take control. But how? She glanced at Marcus. He was already turning away, his phone in hand, fingers flying over the screen as he made calls, talking in a low, urgent tone. His connection to the underground world of crime and politics was invaluable, but she couldn't rely on him alone. She needed to be in the thick of it. Marcus, Kiera said suddenly, her voice sharp. I want to take the lead on this one. I need to talk to the people who work in the city offices. People close to me. Marcus stopped, looking at her. You don't need to do that. I can handle. No, I need to do this, Kiera interrupted. I need to get into the places I know, the rooms where decisions are made. I've been too far removed, trusting too many people who could be in on it. I need to look them in the eye and figure out who's been leaking information. Marcus hesitated, his eyes narrowing as if weighing the decision in his mind. You sure about this? Kiera's jaw tightened. I'm sure. He exhaled and nodded. All right, but be careful. Whoever's behind this is watching you. They know everything about you. She could feel the weight of his warning, but her resolve was unwavering. She wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not when she was this close. The next morning, Kiera walked through the familiar halls of the city offices, her mind a whirl of strategies, suspicions, and unanswered questions. It was quiet, almost too quiet, as if everyone had sensed the storm brewing but didn't yet know how to react. She knew most of the faces here, lawyers, city officials, her colleagues, but today, every glance felt like an interrogation. She could almost feel the eyes on her back, the whispers that were sure to follow her every step. She took a deep breath, pushing past the doubts and fear. This was her domain. She had fought for this position. She wasn't going to let anyone take it from her without a fight. Her first stop was the office of Linda Chase, the city clerk. Linda had been one of Kiera's closest allies in the fight to clean up the city's political corruption. If anyone could help her, it was Linda. But the way Linda's eyes darted around the room when Kiera entered made something in her gut twist. Linda, Kiera said, forcing a calm she didn't feel. I need to ask you a few questions. Linda's face paled, her eyes flickering nervously. She stood up quickly, glancing toward the door as if to ensure no one was watching. What's going on, Kiera? I heard about the arrest. I can't believe this is happening. Kiera held her gaze, trying to read her, but the woman's expression remained unreadable. It's not what you think, Kiera said quietly. I'm being set up, and I need to know who's behind it. I need your help. Linda shifted uncomfortably. I don't know anything, Kiera. I don't know what's going on, but I haven't heard anything about you being under investigation. I don't know anything about the arrest. Kiera's eyes narrowed. Are you sure? Because I'm hearing rumors. People in high places are talking. Linda flinched, her eyes darting to the window before looking back at Kiera. I swear, Kiera, I don't know anything about it. You know I'd help if I could, but there are people higher up that I can't get involved with. Kiera cut her off, stepping forward. I need answers, Linda. I'm not asking for favors. I'm asking for your help. I know you have a way of finding things out. I need you to tell me everything you know about Victor Hayes. Linda went silent at the mention of the name. Kiera could see the change in her. Her shoulders tensed, her lips pressed tight together. I can't, Linda said, her voice a whisper. You don't know what you're asking. Hayes, he's untouchable. No one in this city crosses him and lives to tell the tale. Kiera clenched her fists, the walls closing in on her. I'm not asking you to cross him, Linda. I'm asking you to help me find out what's going on. My life is on the line. For a long moment, Linda said nothing. Her eyes flickered with fear, but Kiera could see something else in her expression, a recognition, a kind of reluctant understanding. Okay, Linda finally said, her voice barely audible. But I can't give you everything. I can't be involved more than this. Kiera nodded, feeling a sense of urgency building. I understand. But you have to tell me where I can find the information. Someone has to know something. Linda hesitated, glancing around the office before leaning in closer. There's a meeting coming up. A private one. It's not public knowledge, but Hayes is going to be there. You need to be careful. If anyone knows you're after him, it's over. Kira's pulse quickened. When and where? It's at the old downtown mansion, Linda said, her voice a whisper. Tonight. Midnight. But Kira, you don't understand. This isn't just a meeting. This is the culmination of everything they've been planning. If you go, you're walking into the lion's den. Kira's mind raced. I'll be ready, but I need to know more. Who else is involved? What's the purpose? I don't know the details, but I can tell you one thing, Linda said, her voice trembling now. There's more than one mole, and they're closer than you think. Watch your back, Kira. Watch everyone's back. Kira's heart hammered in her chest. More than one mole. That was the last thing she needed to hear. But it also confirmed what she'd suspected. She wasn't just fighting an external enemy. She was fighting a war from within, a war that could tear everything she had apart. As she turned to leave, Linda's voice stopped her. You didn't hear it from me, Kira, she said, her words a soft plea. Stay safe. Kira nodded, her resolve only growing. The game was on, and tonight, she was going to take the fight to them. Kira left Linda's office with a heavy weight on her shoulders. The room felt colder now, as if the very air around her was thick with the tension of what she'd just learned. More than one mole. The words replayed in her head like an echo, and the weight of it pressed down on her chest. She hadn't just walked into a conspiracy. She was surrounded by it. The people she thought she could trust, the ones closest to her, could be part of the plot against her. And somewhere in the chaos, Victor Hayes was pulling the strings, hidden in the shadows, just out of reach. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Marcus. She answered quickly, trying to steady her breath. Marcus. I've got a lead, Marcus said, his voice low and urgent. But we don't have much time. I need you to meet me at the warehouse. We're moving quickly now. Kira's pulse quickened. What's going on? What did you find? I've been digging into Hayes's operations, and there's a link between him and a few other people in city politics. Some heavy hitters, people who should be untouchable. But right now, we need to focus on getting to that meeting Linda told you about. Midnight, right? You have to be there. It's the only way we're going to get real answers. Not just answers, Kira said, her voice hardening. I'm not going in there just to gather information. This ends tonight. There was a long pause before Marcus spoke again, quieter this time. Be careful. I know you want to end this, but you need to stay alive long enough to do it. Kira's eyes narrowed. I'm not running, Marcus. I'm going to take them down, all of them. She ended the call, the weight of the decision settling on her. This ends tonight. The thought kept looping in her mind, a steady drumbeat. She knew what she had to do, but the fear, the overwhelming uncertainty of walking into that den of corruption, of walking into the heart of the storm, made her feel like she was stepping into a world of shadows. But there was no turning back now. The hours leading up to midnight felt like an eternity. Kira spent the time going over everything she knew about Victor Hayes, the city's corrupt officials, the whispers of the mole, but she couldn't make sense of it all. Every lead she found seemed to circle back to a bigger question. Who can I trust? She wasn't sure when it happened, but something in her shifted. The fear had stopped controlling her. This wasn't just a matter of survival anymore. It was about reclaiming control of her life, her city, her future. She couldn't let them win. She couldn't let this chaos dictate her fate. When the clock struck 11:30, Kira stood in front of the full-length mirror in her hotel room, staring at her reflection. Her clothes were simple, dark, practical, everything she needed to blend in and stay unnoticed. But the woman staring back at her wasn't the woman she had been this morning. Her eyes were harder now, sharper, and her expression was set in grim determination. Tonight, she was not just Kira Bennett, the state attorney. She was the one who would expose the truth, no matter the cost. The old downtown mansion loomed ahead, its shadowy silhouette outlined by the pale glow of the moon. The entire area felt desolate, far removed from the buzz of the city she knew. The building was a relic, once grand and majestic, now crumbling, a decaying monument to a time long gone. Kira's heart pounded in her chest as she approached, her senses heightened, every small sound amplified in the silence of the night. She had parked a few blocks away, keeping her distance as she made her way through the empty streets. Every step brought her closer to the unknown, closer to whatever game Hayes and his cronies were playing. She reached the gate, hesitated for a moment, and then slipped inside, her body tense but focused. The air around her felt thick with the weight of impending danger. She moved quickly, blending into the shadows as she approached the mansion's back entrance. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for her to slip through unnoticed. She crept inside, her movements careful, controlled. The inside of the mansion was dark, the halls echoing with an unsettling quiet. She could hear muffled voices from the far side of the building, but she couldn't make out what they were saying. Kira glanced around, spotting a narrow hallway that led deeper into the building. She moved toward it, her breath shallow as she crept closer. Every nerve in her body was alert, each step a calculated risk. Then she heard it, a door creaking open. Her heart skipped. She froze. Two men stepped into the hallway, their voices low and indistinct. Kira flattened herself against the wall, holding her breath, praying they wouldn't notice her. They passed without a glance, their heavy footsteps fading into the distance. Kira exhaled, tension flooding out of her body. She had to move fast. The longer she stayed hidden, the less chance she had to find anything useful. She followed the hallway until it opened into a large, dimly lit room. There, gathered around a long table, were several men and women in expensive suits, talking in hushed voices. Hayes was seated at the head of the table, his back to her, the dim light catching the edge of his sharp features. His presence was commanding, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaotic thoughts swirling in Kira's mind. This was it. She'd found the center of the storm. Kira took a deep breath, steeling herself, then crept closer, inching toward the edge of the room, where shadows hid her movements. She strained to hear, hoping to catch a fragment of a conversation, something that would give her an edge. "We have to move fast," Hayes's voice broke through the murmur of others. "The state attorney is a loose end. We deal with her, and everything falls into place." Kira's blood ran cold. They were talking about her. "We can't risk her uncovering anything else. We need to finish this. Finish this." The words echoed in her mind, too loud, too final. But Kira wasn't going to let them finish her. Not tonight. She stepped forward, moving as quietly as she could, but her foot hit something, small, sharp, and loud in the stillness of the room. The group at the table froze. Kira's heart pounded. She didn't have time to think. She darted for the door, but a voice rang out, low and commanding. "Stop." She froze, her back to the group, her hands raised in instinctive surrender. Victor Hayes's voice was sharp now, dangerous. "So, you finally decided to join us, Kira." Kira turned, her breath shallow, her body tense with the threat hanging in the air. "It's time for answers," she said, her voice strong, defiant. Hayes smiled, a slow, dangerous grin. "Oh, you'll get them. But not the way you think." Kira's heart raced as Hayes's words sliced through the silence. She stood frozen, every muscle in her body coiled tight, ready to spring into action. She knew there was no escaping now, no way to back out. She had walked into the lion's den, and the only thing left to do was face whatever came next. Hayes didn't stand. He just sat there at the head of the table, his eyes gleaming with that unsettling calm that made her skin crawl. His fingers tapped lightly on the wood, each sound like a countdown. "You're brave," Hayes said, his voice smooth but laced with an edge. "I'll give you that. Most people wouldn't dare to walk in here after what's happened to you, but you have no idea what you're dealing with." Kira clenched her jaw, her gaze unwavering as she stepped into the center of the room, her eyes flickering between the people at the table. She didn't recognize any of them, but their faces were cold, calculating. No one here was just a bystander. "I'm not here for a lecture, Hayes," she said, her voice steady, even though her pulse thundered in her ears. "I want the truth. You framed me. You want to destroy everything I've worked for, and you've been using people close to me to do it. I want to know why. I want to know who is behind this." A flicker of something crossed his face. Amusement, perhaps, but it was gone as quickly as it had come. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms over his chest. "The why is simple, Kira. People like you, people who pretend to be on the side of justice, are nothing but obstacles to the real power. The ones who actually pull the strings. You've been in our way for too long, disrupting the flow of things. Do you really think the system you've been protecting is any better than the one we've built? He leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. The people who control this city, who control everything, are the ones who make the rules. And you, Kira, were never meant to be part of those rules. Her breath caught in her throat. Hayes wasn't just playing a game for power. He was exposing the ugly truth she had always known, but never wanted to face. The system was rigged. Corruption ran through every corner of the city, and Kira had spent years pretending that it could be fixed. You're delusional if you think I'll help you, Kira said through gritted teeth, forcing her voice to stay strong despite the way his words rattled her. The system you've built will crumble. I'll make sure of it. Hayes chuckled softly, the sound low and mocking. You really think you're going to bring it down alone? You're just a pawn in a game you don't understand. You've been used, Kira, the same way you're using everyone else. He stood, slowly, his presence filling the room. The truth is, you never had a chance. You never will. Kira took a step forward, refusing to let him intimidate her. She could feel the heat of her anger rising in her chest, but she knew she had to stay focused. If she let him see how much he affected her, he would win. You think this is over? She said, her voice sharper now, her eyes locked onto his. I'm going to take you down, and I'm going to take everyone who helped you with me. For a moment, Hayes simply stared at her, his eyes unreadable. Then, a slow smile spread across his face, and he shook his head, almost pitying her. You really believe that, don't you? It's almost sad. He glanced at one of the men sitting at the table, nodding slightly. Bring her here. Before Kira could react, two of Hayes's men stood, moving toward her in a flash. She didn't have time to react before they grabbed her by the arms, pulling her toward the table. Let go of me. Kira struggled, but the men were stronger. She could feel their grip tighten as they forced her to kneel at the table, her face inches from the cold wood. Hayes was standing behind her now, his voice a low murmur. You have no idea how many people you've already lost, Kira. You've played your part, but it's time for the next act. Kira's blood ran cold. Next act? You were never meant to be the hero, Hayes continued, his voice almost conversational. People like you, you fight for the idea of justice. But justice is a tool, Kira. A tool we can use, just like everything else. You've been too blind to see it. But I'll show you. One of the men stepped forward, holding something in his hands. Kira couldn't see what it was at first, but as he moved closer, she realized it was a file. Her file. Her entire life. Her work. The cases she'd built. The decisions she'd made. All of it was there in that file. A record of everything she'd ever done. She looked at Hayes, her voice trembling despite her attempts to steady it. What is this? What do you want with my cases? Hayes smiled darkly. You're going to help me, Kira. You're going to help me clean up the mess you've made. You see, we can't let you keep playing the hero anymore. We can't let you keep disrupting things. You'll do what I tell you, or your precious cases will be used against you. Every little secret, every decision you've made will be laid bare. You'll be the villain. Kira's mind raced. He couldn't do this. He couldn't. The weight of it, the thought of her career being completely destroyed, was almost too much to bear. He was using her work, everything she had dedicated her life to, and turning it into a weapon. But there was one thing Hayes didn't understand. She didn't need to be a hero. She just needed to fight. I'll never help you. Kira spat, her voice coming out stronger than she'd expected. Hayes' smile widened. That's the thing about people like you, Kira. You always think you have a choice. He snapped his fingers, and the room went cold as the lights flickered. And then, everything went dark. Kira was disoriented. Her mind was spinning as she tried to get her bearings. She felt the rough concrete beneath her hands, the coldness of the walls around her. She was somewhere else now, no longer in the mansion. She could hear muffled voices outside the room, but the silence in her head was deafening. The last thing she remembered was the feeling of cold steel pressing into her skin as they dragged her away. They had planned to break her, but she wasn't broken yet. Her hands shook as she stood up, pushing herself to her feet. She wasn't going to let them get away with this. They'd taken everything from her, but they hadn't taken her will. She wasn't done yet, and she wouldn't stop until the truth came out. Kira's fingers clenched as she took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the city. It was about the people who had been crushed under the weight of corruption, who had suffered in silence for too long. She was done playing by their rules. Now, It was her turn to make the rules. Kiera steadied herself, her mind sharpening with clarity, cutting through the fog of fear and confusion. The darkness around her wasn't just a physical absence of light. It was a challenge, a reminder that the forces she was up against would stop at nothing to break her. But she wouldn't let them. Not now. Not ever. Her hands trembled as she stood in the cold, unfamiliar room, her senses coming back to life with a rush. She could hear distant murmurs, low voices that seemed muffled but distinct enough to suggest she wasn't alone. This wasn't the mansion anymore. This was a different kind of holding cell, a place designed to keep people quiet, keep them afraid. But fear wasn't going to hold her down. She moved toward the wall, her fingers tracing the cold, rough concrete. Every inch of her body was alive with tension, the raw need for answers driving her forward. She needed to think, to regroup, to find a way out. There was no way they could keep her here forever. The voices outside grew louder, closer. She pressed her back against the wall, listening intently. They said she'd crack by now. The voice was male, rough, and familiar. It made Kiera's stomach tighten. A second voice, higher, more measured, responded, "Hayes thinks she'll break, but she won't. Not yet. We need to change our approach." Kiera's pulse quickened. Hayes. It was the first time she had heard his name since she was thrown into this place. They thought they had her, but they were wrong. The door to her cell creaked open, and Kiera immediately ducked into the shadows, her body pressed flat against the wall. She needed to be ready. She needed to move fast. Two men entered, their boots heavy against the concrete floor. They stopped just short of where Kiera stood, their backs to her. "She's still out cold," one of the men muttered. "We'll have to move her soon." Kiera's mind raced. She was being moved. But where? And why? They weren't planning on keeping her here for long. The realization hit her like a jolt of electricity. This was bigger than she had thought. Whatever Hayes had planned, it was coming to a head. She needed to act. She stepped lightly across the room, her breath shallow, her feet barely making a sound on the floor. The men were speaking again, their conversation drowned out by the thudding of her own heartbeat. "Don't think she'll last much longer. She's starting to crack." Kiera took a deep breath, clenching her fists. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't just wait around for them to decide her fate. She couldn't be a victim. She was done with being passive. Without a sound, she moved behind one of the men, reaching out to the heavy pipe that protruded from the wall. She gripped it with both hands, steadying herself before swinging it with all the force she could muster. The pipe hit the man squarely in the back, and he collapsed with a grunt, his body crumpling to the floor. The second man spun around, his eyes wide with shock. Before he could reach for his gun, Kiera lunged, using the momentum to knock the weapon from his hand. She twisted his arm behind his back, forcing him to his knees. She held him there, her breath coming in ragged bursts. "Where's Hayes?" she demanded, her voice low and menacing. The man grunted, trying to break free, but Kiera's grip on him was unyielding. "You're not going anywhere until you tell me what's going on." His gaze flickered to the door, then back to her, his face contorted with defiance and pain. "You think you're in control now? You don't know what you're up against. Hayes has already won. You're just a pawn in his game." Kiera's anger flared, but she kept her voice steady, cold. "I'm done being a pawn." With one last wrenching movement, she slammed him against the wall, forcing him to answer her. "He's meeting with the others tonight," he spat. "At the old warehouse on the edge of the city. The plan's already in motion. You can't stop it." Kiera's mind raced. The warehouse. She had to get there. She had to stop whatever Hayes was planning before it was too late. But she wasn't done yet. Not with this man. Not with the ones who had helped Hayes get this far. "Tell me who else is involved," Kiera said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The man sneered, struggling to break free from her grip. "You think anyone's going to save you? Hayes already has the entire system in his pocket. You can't fight back." Kiera's resolve only grew stronger. Hayes might have his fingers in every pie, but that didn't mean she had to play by his rules. "You're wrong," she said firmly. "I don't need anyone to save me. I'll save myself." With one final push, she shoved the man to the floor, knocking him unconscious. Her chest heaved with the adrenaline coursing through her, but there was no time to rest. Every second she wasted meant a second closer to whatever Hayes was planning. She grabbed the man's radio from the table, pressing it to her ear. She didn't know what she was expecting to hear, But when she flipped the switch, the crackling static of the radio hummed to life. She's loose. Repeat. She's loose. Kira's heart skipped a beat. They were looking for her. But she didn't have time to be afraid. She was already on the move, her mind clear, her body tense with purpose. She bolted toward the door, pushing past the obstacles in her way. Hayes wouldn't know what hit him. As she exited the building, the cool night air hit her face, and the familiar outline of the city spread out before her. She wasn't running anymore. She was hunting. The warehouse loomed ahead, its dark silhouette barely visible under the night sky. Kira could feel the weight of her decision settling on her, but there was no turning back. If she was going to end this, she had to confront Hayes head-on. She crept through the shadows, keeping her movements low and quiet, her senses on high alert. The warehouse doors were ajar, a faint light seeping through the cracks. She could hear voices, the low murmur of conversation, and the faint clink of metal against metal. Hayes and his people were inside, making their final moves. Kira took a deep breath, her fingers tight around the gun she'd found in one of the men's pockets. She wasn't going in blind. She wasn't going to let them control the narrative. She was taking back control. Slowly, she slipped inside, her eyes scanning the room. There, in the center, was Hayes, standing tall, surrounded by a group of men and women she didn't recognize. The moment their eyes met, Kira felt the air thicken, the weight of everything she had fought for hanging in the balance. "This is it," Hayes said with that infuriating calm. "You've come to the end of your road, Kira, but it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to fight anymore." Kira's grip on the gun tightened. "I've been fighting for too long to back down now." Hayes's smile was slow, deliberate. "You've already lost." But Kira wasn't listening. She was already moving, already planning her next move, already seeing the way out. This time, it wasn't about survival. It was about victory, and Hayes was going to regret underestimating her. The tension in the warehouse was palpable, thick with the weight of unspoken threats. Kira's fingers wrapped around the gun, her hand steady despite the adrenaline pumping through her veins. Hayes's words hung in the air, but she wasn't listening. She had already decided what needed to be done. "You think you have me cornered," Kira said, her voice cutting through the low murmur of the room. "But you're wrong, Hayes. I'm not afraid of you anymore. And this time, I'm the one making the rules." Hayes chuckled, his laugh low and predatory, his eyes flicking to the people around him. "You still don't get it, do you? This city, the system, it's all mine now. You're just a casualty in a much bigger game." Kira's jaw tightened. He wasn't wrong about one thing. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was bigger than her, bigger than the people in this room. This was about power, control, and a city suffocating under the weight of its corruption. But she wasn't just a casualty. She was the storm that was coming to tear it all down. "You talk like you've already won," Kira said, her eyes narrowing. "But I'm not done fighting. And I'm not alone." Hayes raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but not quite convinced. "You think the police are going to come rushing to your rescue? You think they're going to stop me? They're all on my payroll. You're alone, Kira. And that's how it's always been." Her grip on the gun tightened, her stance unflinching. She couldn't let him rattle her. Not now. Not when she was so close to the endgame. The silence in the room thickened, the weight of Hayes's words hanging heavily over them. But Kira wasn't about to let him control the narrative. Not anymore. "I'm not alone," she said firmly, her voice growing stronger. "I have the truth. And that's something you can't buy or manipulate. You can't hide from it." As if on cue, the sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder by the second. Hayes's smirk faltered, just for a moment, but it was enough. Kira stepped forward, her movements quick and purposeful. "I've been gathering information for months. There's a network of people who are ready to bring this whole thing down. And right now, they're coming for you." The murmur of panic rippled through the room. Hayes's eyes darted toward the door, as if the approaching sirens could somehow save him from the inevitable. But Kira saw the cracks in his calm exterior. He wasn't as untouchable as he thought. "You're not in control anymore," she said, the finality of her words hanging in the air. Just then, the door to the warehouse burst open. Flashing lights illuminated the dim room, cutting through the shadows. A team of officers stormed inside, led by Marcus, his face grim but determined. Behind him, a few familiar faces, detectives Kira had worked with in the past, filed in, their weapons drawn, but their focus on Hayes and his people. Marcus locked eyes with Kiera, giving her a quick nod before turning his attention back to the room. The officers quickly surrounded the men and women at the table, forcing them into submission with practiced precision. Kiera's breath caught in her throat, her chest swelling with a mixture of relief and victory. This was it, the beginning of the end. Hayes wasn't going to walk away from this. He wasn't going to slink back into the shadows like he always had. He was going to pay for everything he had done. Hands up, Hayes, Marcus called, his voice sharp and commanding. Hayes didn't flinch. Instead, he glared at Kiera, his eyes burning with an intensity that bordered on rage. You think this changes anything? He spat. You've won a battle, but not the war. There's always someone else, someone higher up who will take my place. Kiera took a step closer, her voice cold and unyielding. Then let them try. But you're done. Marcus and the officers moved in, swiftly cuffing the people around the table. Hayes was the last to be apprehended, his hands raised in defiance as he was led away by two officers. As the room cleared, Marcus walked toward Kiera, his expression unreadable. He stopped just in front of her, and for a long moment, they stood there, eye to eye. I told you to be careful, Marcus said, a slight edge to his voice. I didn't have a choice, Kiera replied, her tone steady. This was the only way. Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. You could have gotten yourself killed, Kiera. Hayes isn't just some small-time criminal. He had connections everywhere. He still does. I know, Kiera said softly. But this wasn't about me anymore. It was about the people he hurt, the system he destroyed. I had to do something. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I get it. But don't do that again. You've got too much to lose now. You're too important to the city. Kiera smiled faintly, a sense of peace settling over her. I'm not the only one who matters. This city doesn't belong to people like Hayes. It belongs to the people who fight for it, the ones who care enough to change it. She glanced around at the officers securing the warehouse, the faces of the men and women who had been caught in Hayes's web, and felt a quiet sense of pride. This was the beginning of something different. A city that no longer ran on secrets and lies, but on truth, on transparency, and on the courage of those who fought to protect it. Marcus met her gaze, and for the first time in a long while, Kiera felt the weight of the world lift, just a little. You're right, Marcus said quietly. But remember, the fight's never really over. I know, Kiera replied, a quiet fire igniting in her chest. But I'll always keep fighting. For the truth. For the people who need it. I'm not done yet. As the officers loaded the criminals into their vehicles and Hayes was taken away in the back of a police car, Kiera stood tall, her heart steady, knowing that the battle she had fought was just the beginning. The city was hers now, hers to rebuild, to protect, and to ensure that no one would ever hold it hostage again. And she would never stop fighting for it. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. But Kiera Bennett was no longer the woman who had walked into the lion's den. She was the woman who had walked out, stronger and more determined than ever. And she knew, deep down, that she had just begun the most important chapter of her life. The war for justice had only just begun. Kiera stood there in the middle of the warehouse, watching as Hayes and his associates were loaded into police vehicles. The flashing lights outside painted everything in stark blues and reds, but in that moment, it wasn't the chaos of the scene that dominated her thoughts. It was the quiet realization that she had done it. She had taken down one of the most powerful men in the city, exposed the corruption that had run through every layer of government, and set the wheels in motion to change everything. But even as she stood there, feeling the rush of victory, she knew it wasn't over. The fight was far from finished. Hayes was gone, but his network, the people who had propped him up, were still out there. There were other corrupt officials, other dark corners of power to be uncovered. And as much as Kiera wanted to bask in the moment, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that it was just the beginning. You're going to be okay, Kiera. Marcus's voice brought her back to the present. She turned toward him, offering a small smile, but there was weariness in her eyes. It had been a long night, and she knew tomorrow would bring its own set of challenges. I don't know about okay, she replied quietly, but I'm getting there. Marcus stepped closer, his face unreadable. You did good, really good, but we're not done here. There's still work to be done. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. Kiera nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. She had been through enough to know that victory was never guaranteed. Hayes was powerful, yes, but the system that had supported him was even bigger. She could already hear the whispers in the halls of power, the rumblings of those who would try to fill the void he left behind. "I know," she said softly, her gaze flicking to the officers as they completed their task. "And I'm ready for it." Marcus looked at her for a long moment before he spoke again, his voice low. "There's something else I need to tell you. Something I found out while we were closing in on Hayes." Kira raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "The mole you've been worried about. The one who's been feeding Hayes information." Marcus hesitated, glancing around the room before meeting her eyes again. It wasn't just one person. It was a group. People inside the department. People you trust. Her chest tightened, the air suddenly feeling thinner. "What are you talking about?" "Some of your closest allies. Detectives, lawyers, even a few members of your own staff. They were feeding Hayes information, working with him behind your back," Marcus said, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was saying. "They were part of his network." Kira's mind spun, the words a slow drip of realization. The mole. She had suspected it, but the reality of it hit harder than she could have prepared for. People she trusted. It felt like a betrayal at every level. The very people she thought she could rely on were the ones who had been playing her the entire time. "Who?" Her voice was tight, barely more than a whisper. Marcus met her gaze with a grim look. "I don't have all the names yet, but I'm getting there. We're still piecing it together. But I wanted you to know. It's bigger than you think." Kira nodded slowly, the fire in her chest cooling slightly. It wasn't just Hayes she had to dismantle. It was the whole system that had allowed him to thrive, the layers of rot that had grown unnoticed for too long. But she wasn't backing down. She wouldn't. "I can't believe it," she said, her voice hollow with disbelief. "I thought I knew who was on my side." Marcus's expression softened, his voice quieter now. "You didn't know everything, Kira. No one can. But you're going to find out. You're going to make them pay for everything they've done. And you'll make sure this never happens again." Her chest tightened as she exhaled slowly, her mind racing with the gravity of it all. The mole. The thought of it had always been a shadow lurking in her mind, but now it was a cold, hard truth. "Whoever they are," Kira said with a quiet but fierce determination, "they won't get away with it. Not after everything they've put me through, put this city through. They won't." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, a reassuring gesture. "You've got this, Kira. You've always had this." Kira met his eyes, feeling a flicker of gratitude, but the fire inside her was already burning brighter. "No, we've got this. And we're not stopping until we've burned this whole thing to the ground." The next few days were a blur of meetings, paperwork, and phone calls. The police department was in full damage control mode, trying to contain the fallout from the arrests. The media was running wild with the story of Hayes' downfall, but Kira knew better than to let herself get lost in the noise. The real work had just begun. She met with Marcus and a small group of trusted detectives in a secure room at the courthouse, surrounded by files, laptops, and confidential documents. There was no time for pleasantries, only the grim task ahead. "We're digging through every lead we have," Marcus said, his voice steady but heavy with exhaustion. "We've got names, but we're still pulling threads. The mole's network is deep." Kira leaned over the table, studying the documents spread out before her. There were familiar names, people she had worked with for years, trusted with cases, shared victories and losses. And now, those names were connected to a shadowy web of corruption. Her mind raced as she scanned the papers. But then, something caught her eye. A name. "Wait," Kira said, pointing at the file in front of her. "This one. I've seen this name before. He's one of Hayes' key allies. He's been involved in multiple high-profile cases. We need to dig into him, fast." Marcus looked over her shoulder, frowning as he processed the name. "I thought he was clean." "He's not," Kira replied, her voice steady despite the churn in her gut. "He's the one who connected Hayes to several of our top cases. He's been orchestrating things from the inside. I'll bet he's the one who was feeding Hayes information about every move we made." The room fell into a tense silence as the detectives exchanged glances, the weight of Kira's words settling over them. This was it. The next piece of the puzzle was falling into place. But they weren't done yet. "We're going after him," Kira said, her voice unyielding. "We take him down, and we take down the rest. They're not going to get away with this. Not on my watch." Marcus nodded, a spark of determination igniting in his eyes. "Let's do it." As the days passed, the investigation into the mole deepened. Kira's team worked tirelessly, uncovering more names, more connections. And with each discovery, Kira's resolve grew stronger. She had been through hell, but now she was walking towards something even more important than clearing her name. She was fighting for the soul of the city. By the time they had enough evidence to move forward, Kira felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. They were close. They had everything they needed to bring the full extent of the conspiracy to light. And once the truth was exposed, there would be no hiding. The people who had sold out the city, who had betrayed everything Kira stood for, would face justice. It wasn't just a fight for her anymore. It was a fight for everyone who had been hurt, for everyone who had been silenced, for every person who believed in justice. She wasn't going to stop until she'd exposed the full extent of the corruption, no matter how long it took. Kira Bennett wasn't done yet. She had just started, and this time, nothing would stand in her way.